Okay, say I want to move my firm to scheduled work. How do I actually communicate that to my clients in a way that isn't going to PMO? That's short for piss them off, but it's quicker to say it the shorter way. How do I put together a communication plan, get the team all up to speed so they're going to roll this out in the most harmonious way possible? It's one thing to do something that's better. It's another thing to get people to change from one process to another process. Like that's hard for people for whatever reason. Where most of these things die, honestly, is on how they are communicated. A lot of great ideas, a lot of things we could do about our firm, but unless we can communicate that and get that change run through without ticking off our clients, like it kind of all comes down to that. So today, we are building on what we've been learning all week. Monday and Tuesday, we heard stories from folks who have done this switch. Yesterday, we talked about all the different ways you could set your system up. And today, in many ways, it's kind of the biggest thing. How do you roll out a communication plan and actually make that transition happen? Come on in. Let's get to transitioning. Okay, you've made the decision. We're moving to scheduled work. What do we do next? Seems like a good idea. Seems like a lot of smart people are talking about it. Pretty sure we want to design the system this way. Now what? When do we start talking about it with clients, right? But even more abstract than that, what is it? We're sitting here talking about scheduled work and how that's beneficial for your accounting firm. But we're not going to go to our clients and be like, we're now moving to scheduled work. We're not going to call it that. Like, that's not the messaging to them. The inside baseball that we're talking about here is very different than what it's going to look like to put this stuff in front of your clients. As far as your client's concerned, they may have thought that you always had a scheduled approach. They're going to be like, wait a minute. You telling me this whole time there's just been no plan? Like you haven't been scheduling this stuff already? And you'll be like, well, no, I mean, people more or less bring us their stuff when they brought it last time. And then we do it. We do it based on just when you bring it to us. And if we need more people, we hire more people. In many cases, where you're going to start with this is actually going down the client list of generally when things got delivered last year and more or less using that as your starting point for this year. So as big and dramatic of a thing as this feels like for us, is it a big dramatic thing for them? Like, actually, maybe it's not. Like, maybe we're sort of overthinking this in some cases. Now, we're definitely going to put more constraints on it than we did before, right? Like, it's going to be more important the time frame in which they get us that stuff. The starting point might be when they got us everything and when everything got delivered last year. But the reality is you probably want to shift things around there. You're probably going to move stuff around in a way that not only is better for you, but in many cases advisable for the client. And that's where maybe we run the risk of being too accommodating, is if we still let clients dictate the process too much and tell us what to do and when they want to do this and that, you do run a bit of the risk of them basically picking a date or a time frame that you don't agree with, right? I think we talked about this a bit yesterday, but my big business clients, I wanted them to wait as long as possible. So as we're thinking through how to make this medicine go down as easy as possible with our clients, we do have to take care to not hand too much of the control over to them. Ultimately, your job as the accounting professional is to manage like the annual cycle of what they need to be doing. If they're going to dictate that to you, what is the point of you being the expert for them? And some clients will happily jump out of the way. I'm now a client of an accounting firm. Have been the last 2 years. It's great. Highly recommend not doing your own work. Like, even if you're still doing a firm, boy, highly recommend not doing your own stuff. Whenever I say that, half of people are like, what? That's ridiculous. Why would you not do that? The other half are like, yeah, no, that's probably a good idea because nobody gets less attention than me. And you are either the accountant who does your stuff first, bless your heart, or you are the accountant that does your stuff last. And oftentimes there isn't much in the middle. Anyways, highly recommend going out and hiring your own pro. But I now have a professional supporting me, and I'm going to follow their advice because that's literally what I'm paying them to do. If I'm going to come in and dictate when I should file and when I should do this and that, like, what's the point of having that professional? Some clients are totally cool getting in line and getting out of the way. That's exactly what they want, is to get out of the way and somebody else to lose sleep over it. Other clients, it's more transactional. They want to come to you to do a job, and then you do the job, and then they go home. And this is where maybe I mean, these are the people that are getting harder and harder to support. The folks who have like very simple needs, and this is like quick turnaround work, and they just want you to come and do the thing for as cheap as you can and then go away. And maybe this model is a little bit harder for those folks. Somebody commented on last Sunday's YouTube video. There's a YouTube video about, was it last Sunday? I don't know. A recent main channel video. That was about how to, just mechanically, how to double the profit in an accounting firm by making various changes. And they commented, they said, you know, a whole bunch of these clients are $250 a year, like W-2 and interest statement tax return clients. These people aren't going to stick around with a big old fee increase. And in the course of this video, like, we fired a bunch of clients, we made a bunch of kind of hard decisions. And it's like, yeah, anytime you're changing something, the type of client who's going to be the perfect fit for that setup, it probably looks a little bit different. And I would actually say, like, it's not the end of the world if the folks most hard done by a system change are those that are also the hardest ones to, you know, make money on. And I would argue those itty bitty clients are the ones who can most easily find a replacement. Like, if we're talking about tax, like, that is a W-2 1099, that is a retail tax return. That is a TurboTax tax return. It is going to be very hard to make money on that type of work without just feeling like you're running a sweatshop. So anytime you go through a change like this, there are probably going to be some people who are hard done by. And so two ways to look at that. One is we can be accommodating. Like, we don't need to be so, we've talked about this week, but we don't need to be so by the book and by the rules that it's like, well, I've got elderly clients that don't use a computer. Like, we can facilitate that. Like, that is not a hard thing. But the other bigger thing to look out for is, does this system change that is good for me, is it at odds with my best clients and the type of people who I want to attract more of? We heard from Anne on Tuesday that the people who most loved the new process were the people who were good at getting stuff in and could pay attention to detail and were great to work with. Those people love this change. The people who complained the most were not the organized ones. They were the procrastinators. And so if you're going through a change and the good clients love it and the bad clients don't like it, man, that's probably a good thing. If you are going through a system change and it's like, oh, this actually isn't great for who we think our ideal customer is, then it's time to hit the brakes and rethink this. When you're building a firm, it's really hard not to fixate on the clients you have today, and as a result, not build a firm that will be attractive to the clients you want tomorrow. Is that one hit home for you? I spent like 10 years cranking on a firm that had exactly this problem. We were so fixated on the clients that we had that we couldn't design a firm that actually worked for the clients that we wanted. And that's a hard thing, for sure, like, admittedly, to just blindly trust that we're going to make this thing and clients will show up. But as we're doing these things that clients may push back on and it may create some friction, it's hard to not let the wrong people take up too much of your headspace, right? So is the person that's complaining an A client or an F client? The F client is the one who you always mark down and you send them the bill and they still complain. That's the F client. When they complain when you make this change, that's going to irritate you. It is. Like, it just is. Like, you're not human if it doesn't. But what I really want to know is, what do my best clients think? And still take that feedback through the filter of, generally nobody likes having to change to a different system. And like, the perfect person is honestly a new client coming in who's like your ideal client profile. When they come in, what is their reaction to your system? Are they like, cool, yeah, totally makes sense? Or are they like, ooh, yeah, no, this and that can be a little challenging for me? You don't want your systems to be at odds with the ideal customer you're trying to attract. That being said, at the tippy top of the hierarchy, or is it the bottom of the hierarchy, the most important thing is what works for you. And you absolutely can end up in a situation where what your clients need is fundamentally not something you want to do or have the energy to do anymore. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great it is for them if it's not sustainable for you. So that's like the first and foremost, kind of most important thing. But beyond that, like, we want to craft something that our dream clients are excited about, even if it is at odds with some of the folks that we have today. It's really easy to not change while simultaneously saying that the current state of things isn't sustainable. Man, if I had $1 for every time I ran into this. I think I'm just pissing off a bunch of people who have struggled with change management in their firms today. But the whole, everybody agrees the status quo sucks, but nobody's willing to change, right? Oh boy, isn't that a frustrating place to be? The reality is something has to change. And it doesn't mean that all change is good change by any means, but something's got to change to get you from A to B. This episode is sponsored in part by Copilot, the most flexible portal you can imagine for your clients. One of the hardest problems to manage in a firm right now is you got all these different tools with so much overlap, right? That do like some of the same things, but some different things. Almost all of them also want to have a whole like client-facing experience. Like, bro, how many portals do you expect me to put in front of my clients? I'm gonna have a hard time asking them to log into like 8 different things. And even if it's just a magic link kind of portal, when you're sending them to like umpteen different magic link login things and they all look completely different, I don't know, just kind of weak sauce, you know? If only there was a portal for your portals. Wait, what? Somebody write that down. What's that? Oh, that's what Copilot is. It is the one portal to rule them all. Give that client a slick, consistent client experience, a single place to get all the goods. That's because you can customize it to look like whatever you want it to look like, even different from client A to client B. You can embed other stuff into it, bake it right in so that they're logging into Copilot, but some of the stuff that they're seeing is actually from external apps. And they recently launched an app marketplace, which is like third-party apps. You can hire a developer to build you something custom that will live in your portal. It is like a portal platform that you can build on and make it whatever you want it to be. Pretty cool. That's Copilot. Check out the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you in part by TeamUp, helping you recruit top Filipino accountants without any ongoing monthly fees. The difference between TeamUp and all the other offshoring options is that TeamUp helps you hire staff directly. No middleman. You work directly with your new hire in the Philippines. Hire the person, not the company. Guys, gals, gang, here's just a few reasons to hire directly. You have access to higher level talent. Makes sense. You have complete control over team culture and training. They keep 100% of what you pay them, and it's a lot more affordable for you, so you can retain your team for the long term. TeamUp can source accountants with experience working at US or Australian firms, familiar with tools like Xero, QBO, and Dex. Also recruit specialist roles, team leaders, tax specialists, administrative assistants. Thought experiment. What if you had an executive assistant for the first time this tax season? Just throwing it out there. What would they do? Start at that email video I did on the main channel recently. Get help with that stanky old inbox. I digress. TeamUp recruits these talented folks for a flat one-time fee of 4,000 US American dollars. That's it, 4K one time. Somebody at Robert Half just did a spit take. Robert Half reference. We ever gonna get Robert Half to sponsor this pod? Not anymore. And they can connect you with an affordable employer of record if you need help with payroll and compliance once you hire that person. Big fan of hiring in the Philippines. You know I did a bunch of that. Check out the link in the description to learn more about TeamUp. Okay, what are the benefits to the client? Because that's really what we're going to call this. That's how we're going to frame all of this. The benefits to the client: faster turnaround time. You have our full attention. You know exactly when the work's going to be done. We can give you explicit deadlines for when we need all the goodies. And there's no need for you to check in and do status updates, because we're going to give you a date where everything has to be in and a date when it will be out the door. Those are market improvements that they will be excited about. That's what we're leading with in the messaging, is we're changing our systems to ensure a tighter turnaround and give greater transparency over how long it's going to take to get that work done by kind of taking greater control of our capacity and holding you more accountable to the date, like the time frames in which you need to get us all that information. Now, also keep in mind, people fixate more on what they're losing than what they're gaining, right? Like it hurts more to lose something than to get a new thing, which is why I'm going to avoid entirely probably the messaging of we're changing the game, we're flipping the script. Now everyone has to do this and this scheduling thing, or we're going to impose a schedule on you. That's not what I'm going to lead with by any means. I'm going to lead with the benefits for them. We may be fixating on a deadline, on a single sort of like choke point in our annual capacity, but use this as an opportunity to paint a clear picture of what the entire annual life cycle of working with your firm ought to be. Part of that is the deadline. Part of that is that sticky season. But rather than 100% fixating on that, let's paint a picture of what the annual cadence looks like. So depending on how you have these kind of cohorts organized, are they by week, are they by month, by quarter, whatever it is, for your March clients, for your second week in March clients, if that's when they get their stuff delivered, What does the rest of the year look like for that client? What other times during the year are you clearing out time for them to work on tax planning, tech stack review, advisory calls? Like, what does that entire year look like? And how can we give them crystal clear expectations for what information is going to be needed for each of those milestones? That is something that I think near everyone wants, is for somebody to grab the freaking steering wheel. Rather than them having to come to you with stuff and ask questions and all that, everybody always says, oh, I want proactive support, but they're not always willing to pay for proactive support. Well, let's paint a picture of what proactive support looks like. And there's another one of those situations where the folks who are going to be most at odds with this will be the ones who come back and say, yeah, I kind of just want you to do this one thing for me a year and then go away, and to do it as cheaply and quickly as possible, please. So again, the folks who are going to be most at odds with this are probably your bottom tier clients that are going to be the hardest to make money on and the least enjoyable type of client to work with. It's not anybody's fault. The reality is you just can't build a system that works best for every single type of client. Now, we are all working in the same food chain of accounting firms. There's firms upstream from you that charge astronomical rates for things that we can't even comprehend. There are firms downstream from you who are where you were 1 year ago or 20 years ago, like hungry hippoing up any sort of project they can get just to pay the bills and put food on the table. Those firms still exist everywhere that you look. And people tune into this podcast who are in all sorts of wildly different places on that spectrum. Like, there is no average. There is no normal. There is no correct. We are all on like this food chain. Generally, you want to move up the food chain, but the folks that are no longer a great fit for you, they're a great fit for somebody else. Like, stop clinging to them until the end of times, as if for a decade, these people are going to somehow be a perfect fit for exactly what you're doing. It's just not realistic. Something that makes this admittedly much easier is just building out a network of accountants that you can refer to. Compare having to fire a client and not knowing where they'll go and not knowing how they'll get help. And we do put too much focus on this, like carrying this burden for people. And there's also a bit of, well, nobody's going to be as good at this as me, and nobody's going to take care of them quite like I do. That's almost certainly not the case. I like to think it is. I like to think I'm better than everybody else. But the reality is, a client could go out and get help elsewhere. It's the same thing with our teams. And it's because it's like the value we feel like we provide and kind of what we've staked our identity in, that, nobody's better than us and no other place is as good to work as our place is. Maybe that's true. For one firm out there, that's true, but they probably don't listen to this podcast. So the bad news is probably not you. Whether they're your clients, whether they're your team members, like, people will land on their feet and be just fine in this space, like, regardless of what you ultimately do for them. That's a really rewarding thing. I mean, it's great for them, but it's also very rewarding for you. Okay, let's put together like a communication plan of how we're going to start talking about this with our clients. Now, if you're hot on this, don't wait until that next giant deadline to start. In fact, what's the behavior you want clients to be doing in the slower season? Do you want to get them plugged into tax planning, into a tech stack advising call, whatever it is? Why not start this now? We talked about how we fixate on the main deadline and how we schedule capacity all around the main deadline. But how does that impact the rest of that person's year? If they're a March client, when do we do tax planning? When do we do an advising call? All of these things. Well, all these non-busy season things are probably coming up for you. So why not start it then? Or even for part of your clients, start doing it then. Where we can paint, here's the roadmap for the next 12 months. Here's when we're going to do this advising call. Here's when we're going to do your technical work. Here's when we're going to do this, when we're going to do that. You could start that right now. And there's virtually no conversation about next deadline's going to be so different. Like, no, we're like, here's your roadmap for the rest of the year into and through next busy season. People are going to be like, cool, makes sense. Like, thanks for having my back. If it's people doing tax planning for the first time, like you still need to navigate that. Like, here's the cost of it and what that looks like to do for the first time, kind of those conversations, right? If they're bookkeeping clients, you probably already have some things that kind of happen on an annual cadence. So put all that stuff on a calendar. For each of those cohorts of clients, create a little visualization, spin up Canva or something like that. There's all sorts of calendar templates on Canva. Make a cool looking visualization of like, hey, here's our plan for you for the rest of the year, clear through next tax season. or whatever that like choke point is where it's super, super busy. You start doing that now, honestly, it's not even a conversation really in tax season. They already know the plan. And that may be the best way to get into this. Because if you end up with this huge communication kind of challenge in the heat of tax season that you have to navigate, it is then kind of one more thing that you have to navigate in the heat of busy season. And this is a luxury now. If we are not in our busy season, but we're sure that we want to do this, let's find a way to start right now, actually. And as we've been talking about, it's not necessarily something that you got to jump in with 100% of your client base on right away. In fact, a healthy place to start might be the folks who you're like, they're going to be good. They're not going to be bent out of shape about this. That was one of the tips that Ann called out. Don't be afraid to start with the folks for whom this change will be easiest, because then by the time you get to the hard stuff, you've got the talk track down, you've got the system locked down, you're in a much, much better place to have those harder conversations. This episode, it is sponsored in part by the fine folks at LiveFlow. Interesting LiveFlow use case. We've been talking about, how do you get in front of a more specific type of client? And I shared that story of Barbara Corcoran putting out reports, like industry reports, and that boosting their reputation just in the most ridiculous way, because it's like they were the same business yesterday that they are today, but everybody got that report in their hands and they're like, wow, you're the go-to for this and that. Well, it's hard to see all of your clients' financial information in one place, right? You got to drill down into every single QuickBooks file, whatever. But with LiveFlow's consolidations functionality, you can actually connect to a whole bunch of different files and roll them all up into a single spreadsheet. Which means, you could set up custom alerting, custom benchmarking, or if you were to put together, say, a report of some sort of aggregate metrics, trends, that sort of thing. Let's say you got a new little beekeeping niche that maybe you're working on. I said bees, beekeeping. Let's say I got 15 of those clients right now, and I want to put out a little report, and I could roll up those 15 into some consolidated reporting. Look for some trends. If I see some trends, ask that client if they want to, be interviewed and be a part of this report. And it is all because LiveFlow's consolidations feature lets you roll up a bunch of different companies, whether they have the same chart of accounts or not. I did a 5-minute demo day if you haven't seen it yet on YouTube. Pretty cool, showing off the consolidations feature, just a super quick visual, the cleanest way I've ever seen, most straightforward UI for doing big complex consolidations. There's a lot of good information in those accounting files, and it's in some ways it's kind of trapped in those ledgers. LiveFlow, it's a good way to get them out to your spreadsheets, be it Google Sheets or now Excel they support. Pretty exciting. Learn more about LiveFlow, check out the link in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Right Networks. Gang, exciting news here. Now I know tax season just ended, and you need a great place to rest and recharge. I love technology and how it can elevate the accounting profession. So today I want to tell you about Right Now. It is a brand new conference I will be a part of in Austin this May. It's designed for accounting and tax professionals. Right Now is where you can connect and collaborate with thought leaders and an established peer community to learn all the ways you can grow your firm. And the speaker lineup, amazing. You got worldwide AI sensation, Dr. Radhika Dirks, the innovative folks from RightWorks, plus leading accounting experts coming together to give you the tools, insights, and secrets to make your firm all it can be. Hello? I'm speaking. I didn't make it on the list in the ad copy? That's an outrage. And right now, you can save 15% on registration when you visit rightworks.com/rightnow and enter the code STATS15. That's STATS15. It's all happening May 14th through 16th in Austin, Texas. You won't want to miss it. I'll put the link in the show notes along with that code. I'd love to see you there. Come hang in Austin. So the more that you can take it out of the busiest season, I think that's probably a win. If you're building a communication around the busy season, like say it's the tax deadline, you're going to start doing this in January. I generally try to tackle changes like this kind of in 3 waves. First, you're going to tell them that some stuff is changing without getting too into the nitty-gritty. One risk of this first communication being too high level and burying the lead too much is it can create a bunch of anxiety and questions until you give them more details. I've done that before where I'm like, hey, changes are coming and we're going to tell them about you soon. And then everybody's like, what changes are coming? And I'm like, leave me alone. I told you they're coming soon. But some sort of first blast like that around hey, we're going to help you plan out the rest of your year sort of thing, or try to do a better job of having an intentional plan of when we're going to tackle these projects throughout the year. Start with a high level communication to that end. Couple weeks later, usually I'm then sending another communication that's getting into the nitty gritty. Still try to keep this concise and focused on what the value is to them, but paint a picture for them of what the cycle of their year will look like, getting down to exact dates this time. So this could be sending out mass emails by cohort. It could be using something like an email marketing tool that will pull in like placeholder values in certain parts of the email. Worst case, we're just BCCing people by cohort. It may depend on how many cohorts you have. If it's every day or every week, that's going to be a lot. But if it's big groups of clients, that's not too big of a deal. And at this point, I'm going to genuinely spell out, here are the hard deadlines. And the one thing I will say is like, we are taking these dates more seriously than we have in the past. We're going to be a little more rigid about this so we have more control over our capacity and can ensure that we're going to turn things around quickly for you. And if things fall outside of this date range, I don't know, we talked about that a bit yesterday. You either outline clearly what the penalty is, like they go to the end of the line or something, or you just expect them to be adults and follow the rules and be like, no, like you have to follow the rules. Like that's how you work with my firm is you follow the rules. So in this second communication, I'm outlining kind of the date ranges that they're in. Be mindful here of whether you want to let people renegotiate that if they have a good reason for those dates not working. Every step along the way, besides maybe the first email, so I'm going to stress questions, whatever, hit reply to this email. If you're feeling generous, you could put a Calendly link in there. That could lead to some work, but it's not necessarily bad work. 90% of the time when people are bent out of shape about this stuff, as much as I hate to say it, you're a phone call away from everything being fine. Like that's the reality is it's just a matter of making a phone call. And I'm so sick of making those phone calls, man. I just hated doing that stuff. Just dealing with irritated people that I had to bring around to my point of view. It was not my favorite part of the job. But if all you are is, between them being totally fine and where you're at, if all it takes is a phone call, like that's probably an investment worth making. So in each of these communications, make yourself available. Encourage them to hit reply if they have any questions or confused, don't understand anything. If you're feeling generous, put a Calendly link in there. That was another thing Ann did. They had like a mandatory 15-minute meeting to kick off all their tax return projects. They changed a bunch more than just scheduling that year, but you could go as far as like sitting everybody down and saying, here's the deal. And then last, we're going to give them very specific communications leading up to every project. So that could be like, hey, a reminder, you need to have all your stuff in by this date. And for every cohort, that goes out, 2 weeks before the date, a week before the date, 3 days before the date, that sort of thing. If you got a practice management system that can help with this, and we've discussed how this scheduling stuff kind of goes hand in hand with document requests and getting more explicit about the things that we request, and then having clients like upload to your portal the things to resolve those requests one by one. If you're using a practice management system that can help with these reminders, some of this may just be, we're actually going to set up projects with start dates and end dates and actually follow those. Imagine that, like how people actually do projects in the grown-up world, like the real world, not in accounting firms. I don't know why I said the grown-up world. That was very insulting. I'm a big boy too. So this could be as simple as like, depending on the cohort, you might have 7 projects a year for that client, and all the start dates and end dates are decided based on the cohort that they fell into. And then the project management system is notifying them in the lead up to the start of it, like you've got auto reminders there. If you are doing requests, then it's reminding them of the actual things that they need. And then it's the job of your team to like stick to that schedule. And it honestly can be as simple as that. And while we are like hyping up this week and how novel this actually feels to make this switch and this transition, there may be an urge to then go to your client base and hype this up and be like, oh man, this is going to be so much better. The reality is it's just running a better business. It's shorter turnaround times. It's being more available for people. I don't know that this is something that we like Kool-Aid man, super excited through the wall to our clients and be like, hey, we got a wildly different way of doing things now. It's probably just we're taking more control over that annual cadence. Let us show you the perfect cadence for you, and this is the plan. Sound good? Like that's what we're doing. And so as excited as we are, like I would maybe discourage you from making it a big thing and instead make it about like, hey, we took a little extra time this year to sit down and make a plan just for you. This is where we want to handle these projects throughout the year. Does everything look good here? And boom, you just moved to scheduled work. Like that's it. And they're like, oh, shucks. You're the best, Jason. Thanks so much for taking the time to do that. Now that's best case scenario, right? They may see things in that plan that they object to, and you kind of manage those as you get there. But I think the right way to roll this out is to be like, we're thinking of you. We're on your side. You'll notice this is a little bit more locked down than it's been in the past, but it's because we want to get our turnaround times to be faster. We want to be more responsive, more available to you. All really good things for you. That's why we're locking this stuff down. Put that way, boy, it all sounds nice and easy, doesn't it? You know, the reality is, like, working with a bunch of people, there's going to be folks that are annoyed. You're going to have team members who are really stressed by this, and it's not going to be fun for them to manage some hard conversations if clients object, and they're not going to know what to say. And the reality is, like, it's more fiddly than that, right? It's more human, more emotional than that. But let's zoom out and get perspective. If you are now a few weeks removed from your big sweaty deadline, this is the stage where you're starting to feel relaxed and feeling good, and you're like, it wasn't that bad. Right now, it doesn't hurt quite as bad as it did when you were in it, and you're like, something's got to give because I'm about to lose it. So as that feeling starts to go away, I don't want to say like hang on to that rage, but like don't lose perspective of, isn't this just a better way to run a firm fundamentally? Like, isn't this just better in every way? I think it is. I think it gives control back to you. We've heard from a number of folks for whom it was a largely positive experience. I'm actually very interested to hear if anybody has experience trying to do this and it totally flopped, or they didn't like it, or they ran into some surprise issues. Please share. I mean, that stuff's like, we don't just want a bunch of puff pieces. Like, we want the reality of what works and what doesn't work about this. That can save a lot of people a lot of headaches if we can keep a lookout for those gotchas. So if that has been you, please share, drop a comment. Tomorrow, we got a whole bunch of really good questions folks have thrown out about how to navigate some like system things, some kind of mental block things, some how to manage this specific client conversation sort of things. We're going to dive through all that tomorrow. It'll get really nitty gritty. Got any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll pull that stuff in to close out a week on what might be a really significant change for your firm. In fact, if you're going to do this, I would love to hear from you too. Maybe next year, the same week, we do the same thing. And a bunch of y'all who made the switch, we have you back. We hear a bunch more stories, and we're all part of kind of like paying that forward for the next group of folks that explore this sort of thing, right? That'd be cool. Okay, thanks for coming and hanging today. I'll see you tomorrow for Q&A.